No, actually, Dan Lewis, who's supposed to moderate this session, he had to run, so he asked me now to step for him. So apologies already for that one, and yeah, I'll try my best. We are discussing here the new urban agenda. We have a very good and interesting panel. 20 years ago, we have the last meeting on the urban agenda, and the next one is in October in Istanbul. No, in Quito. That was my previous session. October in Quito, we have Habitat 3, and it's, as I was saying, 20 years after the last one. So I think that it's quite an important event, because it will define some future for all of us living in urban areas. As part of the panel, I have Michael Nolan. Michael, welcome. From the UN Global Compact City Programs. I have Colin, welcome. It's a professor in RMIT University. We have Rosa Surinash, UN Habitat and Habitat 3 Secretariat, and we have UCLG. Welcome. I will, as usual, I like to manage some chaotic situations, so I will change the presentations, and I will start with Rosa, since she can give us a good, opening for what's going on with Habitat 3 and the urban agenda. Are you fine? Perfect. Thanks.
Hi, good morning to all. Yeah, actually, I was asking to be the first one because my idea is that I'm here representing the Habitat 3 Secretariat, and the idea of this short presentation is explain you a little bit about the process in which we are now, and basically to put the context on what is Habitat 3 and what is this new urban agenda fit in. So, let me start with the very basics that perhaps most of you know about that, but it's good also to remember that. So Habitat 3 is a UN conference. It's the third United Nations conference on housing and sustainable urban development. So it means that it becomes a conference that is coming from the decision of the General Assembly for all member states of the United Nations that decided to convene this conference to reinvigorate the commitment in sustainable urbanization. So what is happening here is that in this year, in 2016, we will have the conference in Quito, in Ecuador, as we were saying, with an outcome that is what we are calling the new urban agenda. So at the end of the day, all this process that we are following, all these discussions that we are following towards having a new urban paradigm, the result should be, an outcome should be the inputs that we are getting from this conference. So being an official conference of the UN, as most of you know, it means that it's open not only to member states, not only to national governments, so it means that it's also open to the role of local authorities, it's also open to the role of stakeholders and of course, understanding stakeholders as a range group of civil society and all that are included here. So we are always saying that this is the third one. So in what point we are now in 2016? So this started in 1976 in Vancouver, in Canada, with basically the idea that urbanization and also the issue of shelter should be recognized and addressed globally, collectively. So it was the first moment, perhaps, that 40 years ago, that civil society and member states decided that perhaps this was not only national issues, and this was also related to global agendas. So it was the first moment and first discussion, and this is why it was created, this Habitat conference in Canada. 20 years later, in Istanbul, what we have seen, I mean, apart from other issues that it was, that they were very highlighted in the UN, like the participation and the role of local authorities, but the main issue here was that 20 years ago, urbanization was recognized as an opportunity. So it was not only the fact that it was needed to treat it globally, but was also the issue that urbanization was understood as an opportunity and also as a link to start changing the way in which we are living now. Okay, we are now in 2016, and we are now in a moment that if you have been following the processes of the UN, we are in the moment that last September we had an agreement, an adoption of what we call the Sustainable Development Goals. And also we are after a big conference, a big UN conference, COP21, related to climate change. Why I'm highlighting that? I'm highlighting that because this is the first time in which we are seeing that urbanization has been linked to sustainable development. So what we are discussing right now and what we are linking to this new urban agenda is that at the end of the day, all that we have been discussing is true, but we need a new change of paradigm. We need to shift the model that we are having now to be able to get sustainable development. And if we are really getting this urbanization in the way that we understand that it could be, if we are getting a new way to understand the model of urbanization, we know that this can be linked to sustainable development as well. So for first time ever, we are seeing in the goals that you have seen in the Sustainable Development Goals, the link between urbanization and development, and we are seeing that also in the impact of the agenda of climate change and resilience, in the sense that cities are leading this role, local authorities are leading this role, and of course cities are gathering most of the half of the population of the world, so have a voice here in all these discussions. So as said, I mean, the idea is that it's becoming more and more clear that achievement in sustainable urbanizations will depend on how we manage and guide this urbanization. So what is rethinking this new urban agenda at the end of the day? So we are understanding this new urban agenda as something that is that has impact not only in cities, has impact in all communities, that we understand that as a bridge of the rural and urban areas. We are understanding that in all communities we are going to postpone it, right? And 4 hours is enough. So we are understanding that as a way to bring equity and for combating inequalities. We are understanding that in a way that needs to guide us on how we are planning and designing the cities. We are understanding that as a way in which we can create institutional arrangement and we can create new governments to bring all of that to the implementation. So basically, I mean, here what we are listing is perhaps some key elements that as the UN we are following a little bit in the entire process. So it means that some of the tools and some of the instruments that as the UN have we put on the table to follow and the discussions on the new urban agenda has been following all these 6 main topics that we are seeing here. So yes, of course, I mean, the goal of this agenda is to have sustainable, prosperous, equitable, just, equal, and safe cities. And we are saying that because perhaps we are in a moment, and perhaps this is the opportunity after 20 years for reaching that, because sometimes these UN processes are long, sometimes these UN processes needs to have the agreement of many parts and needs to have sometimes many kinds and layers of discussion, but at the end, if there's a document that is agreed by all and has the the support of some of the networks of stakeholders here, it means that something can be changing in the future, and that's perhaps the highlight and the positive part of being part of the conference. So I'm gonna go a little bit to the process in which we are now, and also talking as Habitat 3 Secretariat, and I'm gonna go very quick because. So I'm gonna go basically through more pragmatic issues that we are following right now. So how is this process structured? So we, as Habitat 3 Secretariat, we are receiving part related to knowledge. So we are receiving data on how has been happening the urbanization in the last 20 years. We are having groups that are discussing about policies and recommendations that will be given to member states. And from that, member states are having some meetings that they result to the final outcome. So at this point, we are expecting, and what we are running is the final conclusions of some of these processes, basically groups of experts that they have met in what we call the policy units to release what we are calling the policy papers, and we are running regional and thematic meetings all over the world to also have the voice of all participants that comes to declarations that goes to member states. So the main milestone here is that by the end of April, beginning of May, we will have what we call the draft outcome of the new urban agenda. So in 1 month's time, something like that, a little bit more, we will be having a document that is for all to read, and it's for all to discuss, and it's for all to provide inputs that will be the starting point of discussion for the next half a year until Quito to discuss what is the new urban agenda. So I was saying we are receiving inputs. We are receiving inputs from national governments as national reports. We are receiving inputs of regional sectors through the UN commissions, and we are preparing, of course, the global report on that. You can find some of these basic, let's say, stock-taking papers, that's the name that we are using on the Habitat 3 website, in which you will have a basic idea of 22 topics that they have been drafted and discussed in this road to the new urban agenda. On policy, as I was saying, we had some groups that they were meeting in the last 3 months. We are having here some leaders that were part of these discussions. And last week, they were released 10 policy papers that are the basics of this draft outcome of the new urban agenda. And, well, you can have more information on what are the... I'm going to just make an important point here because it's related also to the city of Barcelona. As I was saying, we are running some regional and thematic meetings that the goal of these meetings is to have a declaration that goes directly as a contribution to the discussions of Habitat 3. One of these meetings is happening in Barcelona at the beginning of April, Forum 5th, under the topic of public spaces. So, of course, I'm encouraging all of you, specifically the ones from Barcelona, to attend the meeting and to participate, because the idea of these meetings is that this is open to all, so it means that everybody can participate and can have a voice to this final declaration. So actually it's a tool for an inclusive process in that sense. So, and you can have more information. We have online dialogues right now on public spaces, in which, like a kind of online forum that you can participate. And just last two things, two important things in terms of engagement. One is that apart from the official process of Habitat 3, we are seeing here the important role of local authorities. So there's, and I'm pretty sure that Pep will talk about that after all. So there's also the role of local authorities that will end in the World Assembly of Local Authorities in Quito. And there's a platform that is the General Assembly of Partners for all stakeholders to join and to bring also the voice to Quito in other strategic ways and in other instruments that they have been also validated by member states. Final conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosa. We are tight on time. We have to leave the room at 1 because there is the wrap-up in plenary. So I will go straight to the presenters. Please, just when one finishes, the other comes up, so I don't have to stand up and, yeah? Let's go.
Thank you. I'm Michael Nolan. I've recently commenced chairing the Cities program, so I'll run through both the ethical city aspect, but through the lens of resilience and what's some of the crossover through that. The part of my background has been working in sustainability and the resilience space for the last 20 odd years, but predominantly in the private sector with a range of work with cities over the last sort of 10 years or so. The little bit of background on the Global Compact, but I'll also step through some of the Ethical Cities campaign linked into the Habitat 3 event. Also wanted to make it clear that RMIT University has hosted the Cities program since 2008, but the Cities program began about 2002 as an initiative from Kofi Annan to support it as an urban program for the Global Compact. The Global Compact focuses on your usual sustainable development aspects from a private sector perspective. We have 10 principles that we try to apply under human rights, labour, environment and anti-corruption being the sort of key focus. Again, we've got 10 principles, but we need to blend those in with the emerging global agendas, both Habitat 3 and the 9 principles of a new urban agenda, as well as all of the SDGs, but particularly number 11 around cities. So the Cities program has that link in the Global Compact. If you're thinking about businesses and their ability to engage on corporate social responsibility, it's more than just the leaders of the businesses. Businesses are made up of citizens, and it's a range of opportunity for them to be able to apply both a range of ethical approaches to the way that they do things. So it's a combination of both the executive of business as well as people within those. In terms of that collaboration, the program primarily is there to foster collaboration between the private sector, public sector and civil society around key global issues. And resilience has been one of those focus areas that has risen to the top in the last 5 years or so, along with a whole range of other focus areas from women empowerment and inclusion right through to affordable housing as key objectives. This is just a capture just to show that we have cities all around the world and have had an evolution of different cities being involved. Barcelona was one of the first cities to be involved about 13, 14 years ago and has been a constant engager with the program, which is a delight to be here. So just wanted to give you a quick example of some of the stuff that we do in terms of understanding how a city sits. Those things that support the resilience of a city very much around that city development and the mechanisms that sit there, as well as the sustainability of the city and the governance, are the binding things that when they get a shock, no matter whether it's human-made or natural, the ability of that city to have strong trust, inclusion, all the things that we just heard about, those can be driven by an ethical focus in terms of the city that we need. Sorry, this is moved faster than I. There's a delay. So for Barcelona, this is just sharing a city scan assessment for the city. You can see there's areas which are in red, which are critical issues, self-identified by the city. And then you have areas, say, in blue, like food security and fair work, which are strengths of the city that you can share with other cities. And then you have some of those areas in amber, can do with some improvement, but are not critical issues, such as public safety and security, social inclusion and equity, social care services, access to adequate housing, access to mobility and public transport, community and cultural identity, and access to employment. Every city we have has a different makeup. Understanding this and being able to prioritise action and measure improvement is important. If you can't measure, you can't improve. On the sustainable development side, strength in water management in terms of the region. And then in a governance context, obviously some issues like many cities around transparency and accounting, accountability, community participation. And so you see all those things are actually actively being approached. So the city we need is very much about those city leaders responding to uncertainty. But it's about how do we engage and build that capacity of the urban stakeholders as learning through the process. And in particular, we like to look at creating a framework around the ethical city, and that framework needs to have both your civic leaders, but also your business leaders, and consider it through how they see an ethical city, different lenses, as well as from the public servant, public official perspective, and from the activist or the global citizen. Each of those different ways of looking at it helps unpack those types of decisions and processes around doing things in a more ethical fashion. And so there's a range of support that we've got for that. Some of this has already gone into, so I'll just cover the MOOC, which is the Massive Online Open course, basically a free course to support in combination with Future Learn around the ethical city and how to support that, as well as a video brief. So we hosted an Urban Thinkers Campus in Melbourne. Resilience was one of the themes, affordable housing and others, to help feed into the agenda in October. Trying to take people through both policy angle and urban solutions, but primarily to take them to the partnerships and what are the collaborations that will make a difference in the city, and bringing out priorities within that. World Vision was a partner for that, as well as the 100 Resilient Cities program in Melbourne. So if you haven't heard of Massive Online Open Learning, these are free capacity building training that's available. This will be launched in October. I'll just skip through to the end, and we've got a range of video briefs to help inform and support people. This is around deliberative development as an ethical city, providing as one capture out of Melbourne, and we have another one that we hope to make through in Barcelona in terms of the mayor and that process of leadership. And so thank you.
Thank you. I have to apologize if I'm rushing the presenters, but I want everybody to have a space. And I know that if somebody don't have enough, if we don't have enough space, then they blame the moderator. And I don't like that. So we go with Colin. So please, Colin, and then we finish with UCLG. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm delighted to be here. As you say, I was introduced as a professor at RMIT University. That is true, but I'm also more now at Chalmers University in Sweden. But as you can tell, I'm probably not quite got a Swedish accent. 20 years ago, I was the European Commission spokesperson at Habitat 2 in Istanbul. It was an accident. The official was ill, senior official was ill, and I was asked to go and deliver the European Commission's paper to Habitat 2. This was based on lots of the work we did in a thing called the Urban Environment Expert Group over a long period of time, and resulted in fact, that year, 1996, the publication of European Sustainable Cities Report. We also, and one of the partners is here, Mohammed, we also had a campaign for about 10 years of all the local government networks, 2,500 towns and cities in Europe, and WHO. And I chaired both the expert group and this. And I think the reason I'm saying this is we're now 20 years on, and there was an enormous spike in work in Europe. It was quite phenomenal then. And I suppose what I've picked up from being in the Resilience Week, and especially from the mayors this morning, was a point about learning. Whether we really do learn. I know the world changes, and you have to have, and people change, and there's differences. But I think one of the things I'd want to leave with you as a message is how do we learn and build, and how do we learn to prepare for the future? And I think that idea is something that's quite important. I'm going to do very quickly now, because I was asked to do it, what's going on in Europe, in particular in relation to decarbonisation and in relation to innovation, in relation to urban transitions. So I'm going to go, where do I do this? Here? Yeah. So I'm going to talk about the European Union Climate KIC. KIC is Knowledge and Innovation Community. And it's very large public-private partnership. Probably the largest on climate innovation, possibly in the world, but certainly in Europe. It's got more than 15 European member states in it. Of the total actively in it. It's 175 partners from business, universities, cities, other public sector organizations, including unions, and civil society. So it's quite an unusual, and it's what we've all been talking about in terms of collaboration, but it is quite powerful in that sense. It has 4 thematic areas: sustainable production systems, urban transitions, sustainable land use, climate metrics and finance, and I'm working relatively recently on urban transition. I'm the advisor on urban transitions. These are the sub-areas the subsectors where we're working. So in relation to cities, we're working on energy, water, waste, transport and mobility, and the built environment broadly. These are the, if you like, the scales we're working on. So we're working in some things just with building elements, just with bits of a window or bits of a heating system. We're working on buildings, we're working on districts, parts of cities, because it's a bit more manageable than the whole city, and we're trying to scale up to work on cities. So we have a thing that they call point innovation, and that's where, in a sense, if we took waste and a building, at that point, we've got innovations happening through these partnerships, through these collaborative partnerships. The complicated thing is we're trying to get to systems innovation and whole systems innovation, and that's where it's much more difficult, as you know, as we've talked about through this week, but it's also where we have to support innovators in relation to trying to scale up and make their point innovations into something more widely usable. So partners and startups are often strong in particular subsystems, so when we go out, we often find people only really have got expertise in one system, not across the board. And Climate KIC will work with the partners to try and get them to move up the system in terms of integration, to move it to systems integration. So there are perhaps 4 observations that I'm making at this stage in relation to I'm helping them with how we move forward in the next funding. By the way, just so that you get excited, there's 87 million euros still to go in relation to this fund for the next, committed over the next 3 years for 5 years' work. It's big bucks, so it's worth getting involved. Enabling infrastructure and systems like, so IT data management is proving to be something that we're lacking and we're not getting enough done. The next point is very important, socio-technical systems and citizen behavior. It's absolutely crucial in relation to all the work on urban transitions. I think this is underplayed at the moment, and this is proving to be a difficult area to work. Perhaps this is where we need, for some of the people here, we need more people working in social policy end of things, and more people working on community development, and more people working in relation to, if you like, the ethnography of urban transitions. We're trying to actually have real-world demonstrators so that people can come and visit something, can see it, and actually experience it, live in it, work in it, whatever it is, so that you can actually take the idea away having experienced it. But there is actually a lack of actors to actually help with coordinating this kind of work. We need almost a kind of cool set of people who can move around and actually do the engagement and actually spread the word in relation to this. Maybe there's another organization here that could actually help with this. So what are the issues in this? I think one of them is the scaling up of things. It's really complicated and a big issue, but that's something where we're now trying to do quite a lot of work. It is based on deep relationships, so it's repeat relationship working to try and build up, particularly the demand side. So it's a lot of work with cities, a lot of work with companies providing things, but that relationship is very, very important, and keeping with that. We're trying to get to demonstrator projects as soon as we can so that the people can experience things. But ultimately, it is trying to get to this larger scale systems innovation we want to get to. So the position so far, this is about 4 years' work. There's 400 new startups, companies, all operating in these different areas. There's 5 flagships scaling up innovation. There's things called accelerators for low carbon technologies. So there's a very big building accelerator, which is doing all sorts of components for buildings. There's living labs for development and demonstration. So there's 4 living labs. So there's 4 buildings just being finished now where you can either go and stay in it or you can work in it. So we have one at Chalmers University of Technology. It's just being finished. We're just calling for people to come and live in it or come and work in it. And then these living labs are designed for really low carbon, and you have to live a low carbon life if you come you come through the system to get into this building. There's been quite a lot of work done on districts. So we've got 8 large parts of cities in Europe where we're working on turning a whole district into a very low carbon district, quite complicated. And then not on here, because I didn't even know about it till a Skype yesterday, we've also got now 8 cities that are trying to work at this top end of trying to get to the more holistic systems, whole systems approach. On education, we're doing conventional education, if you like. So we're supporting some master's programs, we're supporting PhD programs. We have summer schools every year. But the most important thing, perhaps, is professional development. We are actually taking people. So far, there's been 1,500 to 2,000 people who've come on to short courses to actually start to learn this and take this back into local authorities in particular, but also into other areas of work. My last slide for the man who's having to control us all. I think, in my review of this, which is what I'm doing at the moment, there is still a technology bias, and that is also true in this week, or in this week so far, in relation to resilience. I think the social and the governance areas are much more complex, we know that, but they are also showing in this that they're much more complex, and in some cases they're missing. Point innovation, doing this one thing, this one gizmo that helps things do, is easy and is happening, but how you move that to system innovation is much more difficult, and that's where we've got to do quite a lot of work. Scaling up and mainstreaming is difficult, but we have had some successes, especially in relation to the district's work, where we are actually being able to do a whole district, and change a whole district as on the way towards a city. But I think one of the things that's completely missing, there's been all this investment in relation to innovation at those different levels, but there's been very little money invested in preparing the demand side for take-up and adoption. So I talked to Google about this, and Google, in quite a lot of their innovations, spend more money in the preparation of the market than they do in the innovation. And I think we've not got our thinking, or they haven't got their thinking right in relation to how you make changes. You've got to put quite a lot of investment into the take-up. I think the final thing I wanted to say is I think it is very different from 20 years ago in Istanbul. And one of the things that you can pick up as people talk in this Resilience Week is the future used to be something we prepared for, and it was in the future. I think one of the things that's quite telling is that the future is now. So as we do all sorts of things, unfortunately, the future is with us. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Colin. Yeah, fantastic. I have to introduce Roy from UCLG. They are a really important partner for UN Habitat, and please, welcome.
You have no presentation?
No, sí, puedo sacar esto.
Sí,
Okay, what a difficult job in 5 minutes to explain the Habitat 3 agenda, but I'll try, okay? Even if it's in English, it's not my language, okay? But let's try. Well, in the last couple of years, United Nations has been launching different agendas. You have mentioned that. The issue we have now, from the point of view of local governments, is, well, how to make our own narrative, okay? The language that they use at the United Nations is not understood by our mayors. You know, the thing they approach, the way they approach is top-down and our approach is bottom-up. Normally they are separating the agendas in different objectives, and we have to try to put it together and to make sense of everything, okay? So I'm going to try to present the logic of what we call co-creating the city, which makes sense for us. In a sense, the concept of co-creating is that the city is being co-created at the same time in thousands of cities all over the world. And each city is a different way of creating the city. And I think this diversity is very important for us to take into account. We have to look at global agendas, but at the end, cities have to develop their own agenda. So I think this is the first point, diversity. The other things is that I'll try to put 4 examples of 4 things, okay? You remember the number 4? First thing is that there are 4 main actors in co-creating the city. We have the citizens, we have the public sector, we have the private sector, and we have the civil society of the plural sector. And we have this basically in 3 levels, at the local level, national, and global. And 3 by 4, that's 12, so we have 12 different groups working together on co-creating the city. That's the complex. Then we may look at the functions of the city. 4 main functions there. 2 are related to creating value added in cities. That's why we live in cities, because we have value added as citizens, as business, as as civil society, to produce and to consume. And then we have other 2 main functions that are the ones where mayors are very interested in. That is, you know, how do you run this? To run the value added, to run the management of the city, you need to govern the city. And you need governance, and you need assigning resources. 4 things. That's quite simple. So we have to make sure that those 4 things are in place. I'm not going to go into the detail. Then if you have those 4 functions, you may consider 4 main objectives, you know, putting together all this agenda. I was thinking that as we are now in the middle of the presidential campaign in the United States, you may remember that idea of is the economy stupid? Remember, I think it was Clinton times. So I would say that at this moment, when we look at the Habitat Agenda, we should be saying it's inequality is stupid, its sustainability is stupid, its urbanization is stupid, and its resilience is stupid, okay? That's the 4 main aims. And I think we have 4 answers for each one of them, which are mixed. They will be all mixed. But I think that at least from the point of view of the local governments, to inequalities, we are answering with the right of the city. That's a very important issue for us. And also pushing for a kind of new social contract. We have lost the welfare state. How we recover a new social contract to make sure that citizens have a welfare state at the local level? That's a big question for us. Then we have the agenda, well, the sustainability. We have a whole agenda with, 17 goals, 1 devoted to cities, the other 16 also being played in the city. So we have an agenda there. We have to put it together, but we have an agenda. Then the next one is urbanization. This is clearly an Habitat 3 agenda, but not only this subject. I think the right to the city is also Habitat 3 agenda, because those are the 2 pieces that are a little bit lost on the rest of the agenda. So I think those 2 have to be pushed very strongly in Habitat 3. And then we have the 4th one, which it's the resilience. Sometimes I call it fragility. To me, it's more open than that. I think that, we are in a former Roman city where they used to have walls and doors that were closed and open. So I think that cities have to get ready to adapt to changes that are happening outside. And to me, this is resilience, but resilience not only of natural events, not only of climate change, but also of economic changes and technology and innovation and things like this. So we need an agenda for resilience. So these are the 4 main objectives. And then what we have to do as local governments is to make sure that we look at the 2 main axes, the value added and the governance. And in the value added, I think that the main message I would pass is that as we are co-creating the city, we are co-creating the city in a moment in time where we are co-producing and co-consuming. This is a big change. The economic system is changing. We see a lot of experiences going on co-production where citizens are participating, where sometimes we have private sector, public sector mixed. We have civil society producing things. So this co-production is important. Co-consuming is even more important. The concept of sharing cities, collaborative cities, the commons, again, it's the commons again in our agenda. So these are topics that are important. And then if we look at the control chain, I would say, it's governance as assigning the resources. This is a key issue. In governance, we have our traditional objectives that in UCLG we have been treating for a long, long time. We may have principles, democracy, decentralization, governance, participation, distribution of competences, policies, all kinds of policies. We have to make the rules. Joan-Claude is insisting very much on the legal approach, the rules of the city. That's very important. But then at the end, we have still another very important issue, that is how do we assign the resources? And there I put several items, but the ones that are more important for the cities are financial resources. That's a key issue for everything. If we don't solve the financial problem, we will not be able to get the right agenda for Habitat 3. Then we have what I call the infrastructure. That's another basic service infrastructures, and also land use. This is a key issue, how we use land in cities. When we call our agenda, we say people and territory, okay? So just 2 more, two more assigning of resources. 3rd one, human resources. And 4th one that may be linked to what we were saying, technology. So if we put all this together, we will have local agendas for thousands of cities all over the world, and I hope we'll be able to co-create the city with all the partners together. Thank you.
Fantastic. I like this kind of practical, strong, straightforward messages. I apologize because we have no time. It's already almost 1. I will open the floor because I think it's not fair if I don't open the floor for 2, but very straightforward questions as well. Anyone on the floor? Better than I like that. No? Fine. Well, I'm not going to attempt to wrap up this. It was quite rich, but I will say, you have a question to yourself? Yes.
No, it was, I just thought I'd add a point I didn't get around to mentioning is that we're going to be holding an Ethical Cities, thank you, that we're going to be holding a Ethical Cities event in Barcelona in July, just as a way to help bring together a range of issues around energy poverty, housing affordability, and it's that element of the right to the city, but it's just another way to start engaging with it within a number of our cities, and it's a chance to have follow-on in the lead up towards Habitat 3 as all these various campaigns moving in that direction. It's an exciting year. So.
Thanks. I have to thank the panel. I have to apologize with the panel because we were rushing quite a lot. Also with the audience because I'm not Dan Luis. I just step in for him for this moderation. I think we have an opportunity here. If we are going to have a draft of the new urban agenda in May, I will encourage you to have a look and to provide inputs. Because as you know, this is the agenda that we will live for the next at least 20 years. So if we don't do it now, we are going to leave something behind, which is not key. I like very much the point of the documents of the UN. I have the same problem. Are not very, ground on people many times. And I think that it's important for us to push that in the new urban agenda we have that, anchor into the cities and into the people and the local authorities. I like the idea of the learning, which is fantastic. I think we talk a lot about lessons learned, but in reality what we have is lessons identified. We don't learn from the lesson, and I think that that's key, and I think that that's one of the things that we have to start changing as a system in general, all of us, all stakeholders. And just to close, because we have to go to the final wrap-up to this, I love the idea of this the future is now. I really think the future is now. So yeah, I encourage you to go for the new Habitat agenda and pass your messages. Thank you. Thank you.